Members of the UK Independence Party are gathering in the south-east coastal town of Margate today for the spring conference. UKIP party managers have begun rolling out specific policies for the election. Earlier this week, committing the party to increasing NHS funding by £3 billion a year, and today announcing that UKIP will support George Osborne's plan to run a budget surplus by the end of the next Parliament. Party's Deputy Chairman, Suzanne Evans, she joins us from Margate. Welcome, Suzanne Evans. Why are you falling into line with Tory spending plans?
We're not really. What we're saying is that as a party of opposition, which I think, if we're realistic, is what we're going to be after May the 7th, is that we want to hold the feet to the fire of the other parties and make sure that if they make election pledges that are in the best interests of Britain, then we will support them. I think that's fair, honest politics. If they make pledges that we think are against the interests of the people of Britain, then we will oppose them. It's a realistic view, and I think as a future opposition party, that's what we have to take.
But to run a surplus by the end of this Parliament means that departmental spending has to be cut by £30 billion. And given that you agree to some of the ring-fenced departments, that means a 15% cut in the non-ring-fenced. Are you up for that? And can you give us an idea of where these cuts would come?
Well, of course, we've got our own ideas about where the cut should come.
Well, that's what I've just asked you.
We think there should be a cut in the foreign aid budget. We think there should be. We think we should come out of the European Union and save £10 billion a year by the end of the next Parliament. We think there should be a review of the Barnett formula. That would save us in the region of £3 to £8 billion, depending on how the renegotiation goes by the end of the next Parliament. We want to scrap HS2. That's another £4 billion saved by the end of the Parliament on the national debt. So we will also, of course, be pushing very strongly for our own spending cuts.
Yes, but to get to the surplus, and when you would like these things to click in, and that really is a wish list there, to get to that you have to start the cuts in the first place. Now, whether you like it or not, you ain't going to get out of the European Union in the first year. That's not going to happen, and a lot of these other cuts don't factor in either. So how are you going to cut these non-ring-fenced departments this side of getting to the surplus?
Well, we think that some departments should be scrapped altogether. And I think we're already on the record as saying we'd scrap the Department for Energy and Climate Change, which not only costs the country hundreds of billions every year, but it also, of course, costs us, the consumers, in terms of our gas and electricity supplies, hundreds on our electricity bills. So whilst we know that the country is in an economic crisis, we understand that it's going to be tough to get out of it. What we will be pushing for, as I say, and although we want to cut the deficit, we want to look at the national debt as well. I can't really stand on anything else before you today apart from our own manifesto. And Patrick O'Flynn is going to be making a speech later, our economic spokesman, when he will set out in more detail exactly what the plans are.
But you're also going to increase NHS spending by £3 billion. Is that on top? Is that on top of what the government has already said it will increase and what Labour has said, or is that instead of?
No, I think it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because the other parties, I understand, they both said they're going to increase the NHS budget by £2.5 billion. They obviously think they can find the money from somewhere to do that. We said that we found the money in terms of looking at our manifesto commitments, that we can find that £3 billion without actually raising anybody's taxes and without adding to the national debt. And I've explained to you some of how we can find that money. And it will be going into frontline services, 20,000 new nurses, 30,000 new midwives, 8,000 new GPs. All the sort of things that we have been told by the health professionals that we need to actually get our NHS back up to scratch and working.
You begin to sound like Ed Miliband with you begin to sound like Ed Miliband with that list of all the extra nurses you're going to give. So let me get it right that you're going to.
Well, that's certainly not my intention.
Well, that's what some people will think. You're going to follow Tory spending plans now. That's one, and you're going to follow Labour spending when it comes to the NHS. You're just a you're just a pick and mix party now, aren't you? There's nothing radical or original about you.
Do you know what I think, Andrew? I think it's not called. I wouldn't say it's pick and mix. I'd say take the best and leave the rest. That's what I'd say. Pick and mix, I think, is a little bit too negative. I'd say we take the best, we leave the rest.
But on your NHS spending, it is £3 billion. That's roughly what Labour said it would spend. It's not much more than the Conservatives said they would spend. Everybody's in favour of frontline services, though very few people can ever define what they actually are. I don't see the difference.
Well, I think also what we would be saying, what I haven't heard the other parties saying that UKIP's saying very clearly on the NHS is that we also want to look at the wastage in the NHS, about the management structures, about the spin doctors rather than the real doctors, the huge advertising budget. In 1997, when Labour came to power, NHS spending on management was running at about 300 million. It's now well over $1 billion. We've always said, even before we start to put any money into the NHS, there are ways in which we can make it more efficient and make it targeted towards the patient as opposed to the management structures. And I'm sure that's a common sense approach that most people will recognise and want.
Now, a year ago, when you and Nigel Farage were embarrassed by some of the unusual views of your members, you said that you were a new party and you were going to professionalise it. Well, a year on, and we've seen on a BBC documentary that one of your members, activists, didn't like people with Negro features, said that on television, that you've now had to launch an investigation into claims of racist messages on a Facebook involving Leicester and one of your people, and your lesbian, gay and bisexual chairman, transgender chairman, has had to resign and leave UKIP, citing failure of the party to achieve a gay-friendly tone. So what happened to your professionalisation?
Well, what we also do that the other parties don't, Andrew, as you know, is when we find these people, when they come to light, we kick them out. It's that simple. Unfortunately, what the media doesn't do is report the similar instances in the other parties. So I could give you a long list just this month of peccadillos, if you like, in the Labour and the Conservative Party and the Lib Dem Party. There's a long, long list. I do feel, without wanting to make excuses for anybody who has those views, that's absolutely not my intention here. And I watched that programme with, well, I don't really have words to describe how I felt, to be honest.
The list seems to be never-ending every time. I mean, you seem to have to get rid of these people.
Well, Andrew,
at the moment, I mean, it's like whack-a-mole, isn't it? Every time you whack one, another three pop up.
Well, you could say exactly the same for the Labour Party. You could say exactly the same for the Conservative Party and exactly the same for the Lib Dems.
Okay, well, who in the Labour Party has said recently? Who in the Labour Party has said recently that they don't like people with Negro features?
Well, I'm not talking about the self-same exact words, of course not, or the particular
Well, give me something equivalent.
But just this month, I recall, I can think, for instance, about a Labour Party agent who has been jailed for the second time this month, in his lifetime, for child paedophile offences. He was first jailed in 2007, and you know what? The Labour Party still kept him on. That's not something we would do. It's all very well to point the finger at us, but point the finger at the others as well, and make them accountable.
That's been covered in the media. That's been in the press.
They will collapse very, very quickly.
All right. Well, I noticed.
I'm sorry, Andrew, I didn't catch that.
I was saying that's been reported. That's been in the papers.
But I think you made my point. It's not a level playing field, and when it's a level playing field, then you know,
it's not a level playing field because you seem to. It's not a level playing field because you seem to have a close to a monopoly in people that say loony things.
No, I don't believe we do, actually. And as I say, if you actually look in detail, you'll see. Just check the local papers. They're in all the local papers across the country.
Don't worry.
They don't make headline news.
I started life in a local newspaper. I always
and when they come to light, we deal with it. Unfortunately, the others don't.
All right, sounds like a full-time job dealing with it to me. But anyway, we're going to put a picture up on the screen. I'm not sure you'll be able to see it, but it's of Nigel Farage last night in the United States, speaking to, well, what you might call a pretty empty hall in America of conservatives. Yeah. In other words, almost nobody's there. What is he doing speaking to an empty hall thousands of miles away instead of fighting for UKIP in the election campaign, which has already effectively begun?
Do you know what? I think it probably reminds Nigel Farage of the old days, 20 years ago, when he was trying to get this party started. He's told me umpteen stories about how he's speaking to empty halls despite his best efforts. Maybe it will have reminded him where his roots, where he's come from, and just how far
why does he have to go across the Atlantic? Why does he have to go across the Atlantic to find an empty hall? He could come into most London constituencies and get an empty hall.
Well, you know what? I don't believe that. I don't think Nigel will ever face an empty hall again in Britain.
Okay,
do you really?
Very well.
Honestly, I don't.
I have no idea, but I'll leave it to you. Thank you very much, Suzanne, for joining us on
Thank you. Pleasure.
a busy spring conference there.